I'm pretty sure that many of you heard about drifting before. And that's right, that's precisely what you saw on Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift. But how many of you really know what drifting is? How it works, how you do it, how racing works. In today's video I will explain you everything you need to know about drifting, and I will debunk many cliches, like for example that you don't need the handbrake to drift. But let's go in order. Why am I making a video about drifting? Because from the racing videos on this channel you probably learned that I don't know how to drift. It's just that nobody ever taught me how to drift. So, what do you do when you don't know how to do something? You go to a school and you learn how to do it. So that's what I did today. I'm here in Italy, in Castelletto di Branduzzo, to one of the most important schools in the world, Solo Curve di Traverso School, which translated in English means only sideways corners. Yeah. Now, before driving, we did a theoretical session where they taught me the basics of drifting. So, how do you drive a car? If you're going on the road, you know that the goal is to be safe and to reach the destination safely. So there are plenty of rules like speed limits, driving lanes. If you are competing on a track or on a closed road instead, the goal is to win. And to do that, you have to reach the finish line first. It gets easier to crash. And that's why racing cars have so many protections like the roll bar. We're talking about two very different things. However, they have one thing in common: the stability. Whether you're driving on the road or whether you're racing on track, the more stable the car, the better the result. And here comes the drifting, which is the exact opposite. In order to be good at drifting, your car must be unstable. And that means that if you go straight in a drifting race, you lose. You can never be straight. And that makes it a really cool sport. Now, let's take this corner for example. This is the line that a road car makes. Respect the lanes, respect the limits. This, however, is the line that a racing car makes. No speed limits, no lanes, only the fastest possible trajectory. This, on the other hand, is the line that a drifting car makes. It's not stable, but it's sideways. It's not the fastest trajectory. And it's not going faster than a racing car. It's just going slower and wasting tires. But it's doing something spectacular. It's putting on a show, and this is drifting. Now, look at this video of me drifting. Look. Most of you might say, wow, look at that, Naska is drifting. Wrong. This is not drifting, this is power sliding. And we can summarize it as follows. When the sideways part starts in the corner exit, it's not called drifting, it's called power slide. Because in order to do it, you just need to accelerate too much, lose the rear, and then control it. But when the sideways begins before the corner, this is drifting. And I forgot to tell you something basic but very important. Drifting can be done only with the rear-wheel drive cars, because in order to drift, you need to accelerate that much that the rear tires start to spin, they lose grip, and then the car goes sideways. You can also drift with the four-wheel drive, but it's more difficult and they don't use it in competitions. And obviously you can't drift with the front-wheel drive cars. Now, the question is, if the drifting is not faster, why did they invent it and who invented that? Well, obviously, the Japanese people, you may say. Well, actually, according to the history, the first man who started driving sideways was the Italian racing driver Tazio Nuvolari in the 1920s. Nuvolari is universally recognized as one of the best drivers in the history, and Enzo Ferrari stated that Nuvolari had developed a particular driving style. So if we translate in English what Ferrari said, he said that Nuvolari threw the car into the curve with a sharp blow of the steering wheel, putting the car sideways and keeping the gas open. This particular technique made him very fast and unbeatable. So we could say that the inventor of the drift was Tazio Nuvolari. Okay, wait, but I just said a couple minutes ago that drifting is not faster than driving with the car stable. So how come Tazio Nuvolari was driving faster by drifting the car? The thing is that those cars 100 years ago were just horrible, okay? So they were the most undrivable thing in the world. So with those cars, probably that technique was faster. But with nowadays cars, which are super performing, with very grippy, slick tires, every time you go sideways, you lose time. But with those cars, driving sideways was faster, because it was hard to steer. They had no grip. So the best way to steer was putting the car sideways, like in rallies, for example. In rallies, where you don't have the grip of a slick tire on tarmac, drifting is faster. So short, if Tazio Nuvolari started driving sideways to go faster 100 years ago, the Japanese 50 years ago in the 70s used to drift to go faster in the mountain roads. But apart from that, they also did it to have fun, okay? Because it's fun to drift. So the father of the modern drifting is considered to be, it's quite hard to read, Kunimitsu Takahashi, who at the beginning of the 70s invented the drifting technique, without, however, refining it. Then came Keiichi Tsuchiya, which has been nicknamed the Drift King, which also appeared as a special guest in the movie Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift, who perfected the technique and used it in the illegal races in the Japanese mountains. Yeah, that's right! The thing that you saw in Tokyo Drift, which has obviously been revisited by the movie, actually happened in some ways. And one of the videos considered the Bible of drifting is Plupsy, that you can find on YouTube. And in that video you can see Tsuchiya's skills while drifting cars on Japanese hills. And this video inspired many of the drifting professionals that you can see today. But now there is one missing part. How did we go from the illegal races on the Japanese streets to a sport regulated by FIA? This is where Nicola Tesini, the founder of the school, comes into play. And yeah, I mean, I'm proud to be Italian because we Italians did some very cool things in history. Nicola Tesini is the son of Danilo Tesini, who was the mechanic of Tazio Nuvolari. Can you see how small the world actually is? Nicola raced for many years with every kind of car until he discovered drifting and he fell in love with it. So in 2004 he imported the drifting from Japan to Italy by creating the school Solo Curve di Traverso. You can find the school reference in the description. It's in Italian, but feel free to explore the website. At that point, Tesini wanted to regulate drifting under the FIA, but there was a problem. How do you regulate a motorsport where the lap timer is useless? This was the big work that Nicola Tesini. So thanks to him, the drifting was regulated worldwide, and his school organized the first state year of the Italian Championship in Italy. Now, perhaps you're all wondering, okay, but how does the drift race works? Now, I will explain you the rules, and then I will explain you the technique. The first fundamental thing to know is that drifting is not a time trial sport, but it's a sport with a jury. The winner is chosen by judges who evaluate the skills and a series of parameters. Drift races take place in a track made of just a series of corners, so it's not a circuit, it's just a series of curves. So we have 3 practice sessions where the drivers get familiar with the track, and then we do the qualifying. In qualifying, each driver can do 2 runs. The best one of the 2 give him the qualifying score. The jury evaluates each run from 0 to 100, and generally they can give you rules like not using the handbrake or hitting the clipping points. Clipping points are some points where you have to drift as close as possible, like, you know, in Can Block videos. If you make a mistake and spin, you get 0. If you put the car straight, even just for a moment, you get 0. And many other parameters are evaluated. Okay, but you may wonder, how can a sport be fair if it's just based on human judgment? There should be something more precise. And here Tesini holds another record. He invented the telemetry. And you know how the first telemetry was done? They just stitched the Samsung Galaxy S3, and with the gyroscopes inside the smartphone, they recorded everything. So like the drifting angles, the G-forces. So with that, the judges had some objective data to evaluate. Whoever made the best qualifying results starts in front, and he's called the lead, while the other driver starts behind, and he's called chaser or chase. So the lead car starts drifting, and the chaser has just one purpose: to drift by copying the exact maneuvers of the lead and by staying as close as possible. If they touch a little bit, that's fine, but if the chase car touches the lead too hard and makes it spin, the chase gets 0. Once the run is over, they swap position and they repeat the same. At the end of the 2 runs, the judges evaluate who was the best chaser, and they decide who to eliminate. So the eliminations go through until the final, where the winner will be the winner of the competition. So today I'm in Castelletto di Branduzzo, an Italian circuit, where I will learn and show you the basics of drifting. I'll get familiar with the 200 HP Toyota GT86, and then I will move on to a BMW M2 competition with 411 horsepower. So the first drifts are made in a wet forecourt. And this is because with wet ground, the car loses grip easily, so it's easier to get confident with driving sideways.
Lui è Manuel, 2 volte campione italiano. Questa è la primissima volta che provo a driftare, quindi abbiate pietà di me. Schiacciamo l'anteriore, sì. Inseriamo di
terzo, subito pronti di gas, guardi.
One of the cliches that must be debunked is that in order to drift, you need a handbrake. Wrong. I mean, every drift car has a handbrake, which is used during competitions, both to start drifting and to control the maneuver. But you can drift without using it. And that's what they teach you at the Tesini driving school. They teach you to drift without the handbrake, so that you know how to drift without it. That way, when you want to use it, everything will get easier. And this is what you need to do to drift. You accelerate with the car straight to pick up speed, you brake very hard to transfer all the load to the front and unload the rear, and at this point simultaneously you do three things. You release the brake, you push 100% throttle, you steer into the corner, and when the car starts to drift, you keep the throttle on, you launch the steering wheel in counter steer, and at that point you use the throttle just to control the drifting maneuver. You don't feel it from the video, but I felt it a lot while drifting. Every time you make a corner, the rear differential does something like tock, tock, tock. And this is because the drifting car has a particular setup. While the road cars are designed to go straight and be stable, the drift cars are designed not to go straight and not to be stable. So the basic adjustments are tons of camber in the front wheels further apart, lots of steering so that you can control the car even at 90 degrees, and the most important thing, the rear differential modified to let you drift. The simplest thing is to just weld the rear differential so that it's not anymore a differential, but actually in the drifting cars, it's not 100% stuck. They just stiffen it a lot in order to make the car easier to drift. So after taking the first steps with the Toyota GT86, now I will drive the BMW M2 competition. For some things it would be easier, because it's a heavier car and a more powerful car, almost twice the power, while for some others, I don't know. I have no idea. I need to try and I'll tell you later.
Puttana, da forte la legnata qua, eh? Palle!
Frena di più. Ricordati i punti di riferimento con lo sguardo.
Ah, quasi!
Lo sguardo.
Lo sguardo, è vero, cazzo!
Guarda dov'è lo sguardo. Solo questione di sguardo.
And here I learned the most important thing about drifting, which is looking. I mean, I know that looking is important, I also did a video about it. But when you're drifting, it's 100,000 times more important. Because every time I lost control, it was just for one reason. I was not looking in the right spot. And that's so important because if you're racing on track, even if you don't look, you can still race. But when you're drifting, it means you're controlling a car in an instability situation. So keeping the right balance is super important. And that's why the looking is so important. And now look at what I was able to do once I started looking in the right spot. That's incredible. Notice how I'm not looking straight, but I'm looking outside the window. And one thing that I needed to change was do not look at the apex, which is the opposite you do in racing. So now, $1,000,000 question. In order to drift, you need very old and used tires with no grip, or you need super soft and new tires with a lot of grip. So if I started drifting on the wet road, obviously in order to drift, you need tires with no grip, right? Wrong. In order to drift, in the drift races they use semi-slick tires with a lot of grip. I know it may sound silly, but that's the truth. This is because if the tire has a lot of grip, it means it has more grip. So it's a bit harder to start drifting, but once you're drifting, it's easier to control the car because of the grip. The only downside is that when you lose control of the car and you have a lot of grip, it's easy to crash into the wall. And the other downside is that you have to change tires every run. Yeah, it's quite common to use 40 tires for every racing weekend. Luckily, they just cost around 100 euros per tire, so yeah. And this is also the reason why the drifting cars has a ton of horsepower, because in order to drift a tire with a lot of grip, you need a big power. And especially if you are the lead car, the more horsepower you get, the harder it will be for the chaser to follow you. So that's why the drifting cars are constantly working on getting as much power as possible. Now, do you remember the NOS? You say NOS or NOS in English? In Italian we say NOS, that you have seen in Fast and Furious. They actually used it in Japan back in the days, because the cars from the past didn't have many horsepower and all the power was in the high RPMs. So in order to get more power in the low RPMs, in a time where they didn't have the ECUs, they used to use the NOS in order to get more power. The thing is that many engines used to blow up, so they stopped using it. Actually, they told me that some people still use it, but it's not that common.
Allora com'è andata?
Che figata!
Ti sei divertito?
No, ma c'è troppo. Mi ha sbloccato una quantità di cose incredibili nella testa.
È una filosofia di guida, o lo si ama o lo si odia, quindi questo è un tassello
fondamentale
nel motorsport. Cioè, è chiaro che chi dice ma io non andrò mai di traverso, perdere una macchina è una perdita di tempo, certo, ma quella volta che ti capita, quella volta che non hai più il controllo, in una gara bagnata, un sorpasso azzardato, la macchina ti si intraversa, cosa fai? Ah, ok, ci ho provato. Come ci ho provato? Potevi correggerla quella macchina. Qualche gran buon pilota attuale che corre nel GT, non voglio fare nomi e cognomi, piloti ufficiali, hanno detto che questa cosa qui l'hanno fatta da me e non la racconteranno e non lo diranno mai a nessuno, perché questa cosa qui gli ha cambiato proprio l'approccio diretto alle gare endurance e quindi anche, diciamo così, alle vittorie.
Spettacolo. Bene, prossima volta allora?
Ti aspetta quel cannone lì. Forza e coraggio, questa è la tua prossima auto.
Ma davvero?
Ma vai!
Yeah, you got it right. Next time I will drive this. It will be one of the most orgasmic experiences in my whole life. You will see it on this channel, so if you wanna see part 2, please subscribe, because it's going to be an amazing video. In the meantime, I left in the description the website of the Italian Drifting School. Thank you so much, guys. See you soon.